Cycling sensation Laura Kenny becomes Team GB's most decorated female Olympian.
They haven't put a foot wrong. They have dominated the race from start to finish. It has been a five-star effort, a brilliant effort, an Olympic title-winning effort from Laura Kenny.
After she and Katie Archibald take gold in the first Olympic women's Madison, Laura Kenny paid tribute to their remarkable teammanship.
Just to have Katie there the whole time, I feel like I'm racing with a sister, and I couldn't have done it if we didn't have that relationship.
Well, on a historic day, we will have the very latest live from Tokyo. Also this lunchtime. Gas and electricity bills will go up for millions of people after the regulator raised the energy price cap by a record amount. Thousands of people sign a petition to save an alpaca which faces being put down after being tested positive for bovine TB. Barcelona says its star player Lionel Messi will leave this summer after more than 20 years with the club. And one of the biggest arts festivals in the world, the Edinburgh Fringe, finally gets underway today after it was cancelled last summer because of the pandemic.
And coming up on the BBC News channel, for the third Olympics running, Team GB's women hockey players win a medal and say a bronze was beyond their wildest dreams just a few months ago.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to BBC News. The cyclist Laura Kenny has become Britain's most decorated female Olympic athlete after she and teammate Katie Archibald won the women's Madison event in the velodrome. The pair dominated the 120-lap race, winning 10 of the 12 sprints. It means Kenny has won golds in 3 consecutive Olympic Games and Archibald in 2. Elsewhere, after their gold in Rio, Britain's hockey women have taken bronze in Tokyo with a narrow victory over India. Well, our sports editor, Dan Rowan, is, of course, in Tokyo. And in fact, just in the last few moments, another gold that you can tell us about, Dan.
That's right, yes. Kate French in the modern pentathlon, as you say, has just won. She came into the final day in 6th place out of a field of 36. But in the last few minutes, yes, she has clinched Team GB's 18th gold. It's been a fabulous day for the British here in Tokyo. As you've said, it was a big one for Laura Kenny. She's already, before today, among the very greatest of British Olympians. She was one of 4 women in Team GB who were trying here in Tokyo to become the first in British Olympic history to win gold in 3 successive games. The others, Charlotte Dujardin, Helen Glover and Jade Jones as well. Now, the velodrome has always been, in recent games, a very happy hunting ground, hasn't it? It had been somewhat frustrating for the British up until yesterday when Matt Walls, of course, struck gold in the Omnium to establish himself as British cycling's big new star. But one of their established names, Laura Kenny, alongside Katie Archibald today, delivered when it mattered most. As Andy Swiss now reports.
Hurtling into the history books, a day when Laura Kenny went where no British woman has gone before. A 5th Olympic title as she and Katie Archibald produced a sporting masterclass. The Madison is cycling's version of the relay, and there were no shortage of thrills and spills. This is the first time there's been a women's race at the Games, and the British pair showed the rest how it's done. A triumph of talent and teamwork.
They haven't put a foot wrong. They have dominated the race from start to finish.
Delight for the duo, but especially for Kenny, now the most decorated British woman in Olympic history. But she said missing her 3-year-old son had been the toughest part.
You know, I kept saying to people, please don't ask me about Albie, but I couldn't have done it without these girls. Like, honestly, it's so hard leaving him at home, and just to have Katie there the whole time, I feel like I'm racing with a sister, and I couldn't have done it if we didn't have that relationship.
And there was soon more cycling success for Britain as Jack Carlin took bronze in the men's sprint. For the third games in a row, the women's hockey team are celebrating a medal, but my, they had to work for it. They had been trailing India in their playoff for bronze, but in the nick of time, they turned it round.
Yes, they found the goal!
Grace Balsden's goals securing a 4-3 win, and after a difficult few years for the team, it was all the sweeter.
If you'd asked me a couple of months ago, would we come away with Olympic bronze, I think I would have laughed at you. I think this last cycle has been so tough. We have stuck together and we've come out with an Olympic bronze medal, and we are just, I think we're speechless.
In the boxing, meanwhile, former taxi driver Lauren Price is en route to the final, but it was hardly one-way traffic. After being docked to point for holding on to her opponent, she needed a stunning last round to edge past Nushka Fontaine, and just listen to what it meant. Price, who's also played football for Wales, will now fight for gold, and she can't wait.
It's nothing new to me going into the final. I've been there before, Wales, Europeans and stuff like that, so it's nothing new to me. But it's everyone's dream to get to that Olympic final, and I'm going to do my utmost to bring back that gold.
And it was the return of Britain's most famous knitter. Tom Daley's handiwork has proved quite a hit, but there was nothing woolly about his diving, as after his gold in the synchronised event, he eased through qualifying in the individual. Can he stitch together another Olympic masterpiece? Andy Swiss, BBC News.
So Laura Kenny now joins other cyclists, Sir Bradley Wiggins, Sir Chris Hoy, but also Sir Steve Redgrave and, remarkably, her husband Jason Kenny. They're the only British Olympians in history to have at least 5 gold medals, and she has the prospect of more to come, would you believe, until the end of these games. Now, there's more possibility of British success here at the Athletic Stadium tonight. We have Laura Muir in the women's 1500 metre final, Jodie Williams in the 400 metre final, Andy Butchart in the 5000 metre men's final as well, and then at the end of the evening we have the sprint relays. Dina Asher-Smith will be part of a women's 100 metre relay team that has a real chance of success, as do the men. So lots of excitement in store here in the Athletic Stadium before the end of the night.
What a day. Thank you very much, Dan Rowan in Tokyo. Let's also hear from our correspondent Eleanor Roper, because she's in Welwyn Garden City at the club where Laura Kenny began cycling. Eleanor.
Yes, this is where she first got on a bike. This is where it all started for her. Little did we know back then, though, that she'd go on to win gold at 3 successive Olympics. Now, we're joined by Francis, the head coach at Welwyn Wheelers. You were going wild this morning. Tell us, what did you make of the Madison?
I was just completely blown away. That is the best race I've ever seen, and they actually dominated it and just blew the rest of the world apart. Fantastic.
What is it about Laura that makes her such a great cyclist, such a great competitor?
Grit, determination, and never give in, never give up, and she always wants to win.
Has she always been like that?
Oh yes, right from a very young age. She was always competitive, and she's been an inspiration to all our young riders.
When did you spot something special? When did you think that this girl could go really far?
Right from the early age, probably about 9, 10, when she was down here. I introduced her to the track when she was about 7, 8 years old. And from that point on, you know, she loved the track from day one, and she's just gone on and on. Never did I dream in my wildest dreams that she'd go all the way that she has done to win gold medals, but she's been an inspiration to the club.
Now, we were watching this morning with various young riders. What does it really mean to everyone to see her succeed like this?
It's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. We're still producing young riders on the same pathway that Laura started on all those years ago, which is still in existence today. And look at the young riders that are coming through from that pathway. And I've got 3 junior riders that are on the same pathway now that are doing the European Championships next week. So yeah, it's brilliant.
And more to come. We know Laura's medal haul isn't yet over. She'll go again on Sunday in the Omnium.
Eleanor, thank you, Eleanor Roper. And now we turn to the rest of the day's news. And gas and electricity bills will increase for millions of people in October after the regulator Ofgem raised the energy price cap by a record amount. On average, a household on a standard tariff will pay an extra £139 a year, while those on prepayment meters face an increase of £153. Charities are warning that the timing will hit struggling families hard. Coletta Smith reports.
Summer holiday thrills don't come cheap, so the thought of an increase in energy bills schools in the autumn is a worrying one. But that's what will be happening from the 1st of October.
I know a lot of families, they're strictly on the line, aren't they? So even a £20 is a lot of money, isn't it? It's a food for the week.
It'll impact everyone on prepayment meters or the default standard variable tariffs. That's half of all the households in Britain. Ofgem insists the changes are necessary because of the rising wholesale costs of energy.
We've seen a record increase in fossil fuel prices across the board, actually, not just gas and electricity, but also petrol and diesel. We've had to feed that through to the calculation and into the price cap. Now, what the price cap does is it makes sure that we don't go back to the bad old days where companies charge unfair profits on top of the amount that you pay. But clearly, when input costs change, that limit does need to change.
The autumn is, of course, when we stick on our heating and electricity so much more. But it's also a moment that furlough comes to an end and universal credit is being cut. Debt charities say this latest increase couldn't have come at a worse time, and it'll hit families who are struggling the most.
We are faced with a bit of a conundrum, which is going to end up being food versus fuel, I believe. How are the poorest of society going to be able to suck it up? You know, we're already on the breadline, working in the closest balance of finance in the long time.
With another 2 months to go until prices go up, there's still time to shop around for a better deal. Coletta Smith, BBC News in Warrington.
The Department for Education is to fund hundreds of extra places at medical schools in England because more students than expected have got the required A-level grades after exams were scrapped for the second consecutive year. Numbers on medicine and dentistry courses are usually capped by the government because of the cost and the need for clinical placements in the NHS. Elaine Dunkley reports.
Doctors and dentists are much in demand, but there is tough competition for places at universities. The numbers are capped by the government because of the cost of courses. But with more students this year expected to qualify after exams were replaced with teacher-assessed grades, the government is asking universities to take on more students.
Universities are not fully ready for the challenge because they gave out their offers for medical courses months ago, and now there's going to be huge grade inflation probably on Tuesday. So they're going to have far more students saying, I've got a right to come to this course than the university has places available.
A degree in medicine costs around £180,000, so the numbers are capped by the government. In 2019, that meant just over 8,300 students starting medicine and dentistry degrees in England. Last year, because of chaos caused by changes to how A-levels were graded, an extra 450 places were created. Now the government says in England the cap will be lifted to more than 9,000 places and extra money will be found. Julia Lowe has secured a place at Oxford University and says after a tough year, it's good news for students who want a career in medicine.
It's really good news that the government is, supporting medicine students and allowing lots of more people to access those kinds of resources, especially considering how hard it's been to get those grades in the past year.
But universities say it's not just about money. They need time to prepare. This week, Exeter University has offered £10,000 to persuade some medical students to defer.
But if there is an element of grade inflation, universities will work flexibly to make sure that they are really working in the interest of students. But I'd also point to clearing. Clearing is increasingly attractive.
Next week, students will find out their A-level results. And with some courses oversubscribed, the pressure will shift to universities to find places. Elaine Dunkley, BBC News.
The government has been defending the Minister Alok Sharma, who's travelled abroad to more than 30 countries in his role as President of the Climate Summit COP26, which will take place in Glasgow later this year. Let's get more from our political correspondent, Jonathan Blake. What has he apparently done and what's the government saying about it, Jonathan?
His job as president of the forthcoming COP26 climate change conference to travel the world, drum up support for that and get other countries on board with the government's aims. But it's the sheer amount of air miles that he's been racking up in the course of that have drawn criticism and raised eyebrows. As you say, more than 30 countries since taking on the role. And he hasn't had to quarantine when returning from those on the amber or red list because government ministers are exempt from that rule if they're travelling on official business. But Labour and the Liberal Democrats say that this is another example of one rule for government ministers and one rule for everybody else. The Greens say his travel has been excessive and hypocritical, hinting at the environmental impact of all this international air travel. The government, though, defending his trips, saying that while virtual meetings play a large part, face-to-face meetings are crucial to achieving the government's climate change aims. And he hasn't exactly been doing all this in secret. Just yesterday, tweeting pictures of his trip to Brazil, which is, of course, on the red list, talking about constructive meetings there. So potentially embarrassing for the government, with some criticism coming their way. Whether it gets any more difficult will depend, I think, on the credibility and success of the COP26 summit itself. Was all this effort worth it in the end?
All right, thanks, Jonathan Blake. The government is to introduce a cancellation insurance scheme to try to protect live events, including music festivals and business conferences. The scheme is designed to allow organisers to plan with greater certainty. More than half of all music festivals were cancelled this year, with many saying an inability to obtain COVID-related insurance was a factor in their decision. Here's our entertainment correspondent, Lizo Mazimba.
Lockdown may have been lifted, but the music industry says it's still been a disappointing summer. While some festivals have gone ahead, a few as part of the government's pilot programme, when it comes to large-scale events with a capacity of more than 50,000, more than half have been cancelled. So the £750 million scheme has been broadly welcomed by an industry which sees festivals as a big part of the country's economic recovery.
Look at things like Glastonbury, which generates hundreds of millions of pounds for the local area, concerts across the country that help create jobs, growth throughout the supply chains. As we're looking to recover from this pandemic, large music events can be the key, can be one of the drivers of this post-pandemic economic and cultural recovery.
But it hasn't delivered everything people hoped for. While festivals would be covered in the event of a full lockdown, they wouldn't be covered if social distancing rules were brought in, which reduced capacity and made it uneconomic for the event to go ahead. And with the scheme starting in September, it's left huge numbers disappointed it wasn't brought in earlier.
With the cancellations that have happened across the summer, extremely frustrating for many who've had to cancel, and particularly for the many businesses behind these festivals, the supply chain, the freelancers that have been beleaguered and lost so much revenue over this period due to those cancellations.
So all agree a step in the right direction, but the industry is keen for the government to keep working with them to provide the complete backing they say they need to protect the festival sector. Lizo Mazimba, BBC News.
The time is 18 minutes past 12. Our top story this lunchtime.
Just to have Katie there the whole time, I feel like I'm racing with a sister, and I couldn't have done it if we didn't have that relationship.
Coming up on the BBC News channel, it will be at least a silver medal for the Team GB boxer Lauren Price, who wins her semi-final middleweight bout to qualify for Sunday's gold medal match.
In Italy, anyone who now wants to visit a range of venues, including restaurants, sports facilities and cultural sites, now has to produce a green card showing a record of COVID vaccination, of a negative test or proof of recovery from coronavirus. While opinion polls suggest a majority of people in the country are in favour of this, the rules have prompted protests as well. Our Italy correspondent Mark Lowen reports from Verona.
A night at the opera. Tickets, temperature check, and from today, the mandatory green pass, a COVID vaccination certificate, negative test, or proof of recovery, as Italy tightens its rules from theatres to restaurants, gyms to cafes.
Well, this is how it'll work in practice. I come up to the venue in question, Buonasera, present my green pass, which in my case is a vaccination certificate. It's verified. This device doesn't save the data. I present my ID card and I'm allowed to enter. It's a big change and a big challenge for those involved.
Nobody taught us how to face COVID, you know. So at the beginning, we were afraid, we were nervous, we were anxious. Then, month by month, we solved new problem, giving new solution. And this, after 18 months, we built a little of self-confidence. So let's say that now the situation is, it is not a problem. This is another problem regarding COVID.
Verona's arena has already adapted to COVID. Fewer performers, masks and half capacity. But with the green pass, the drama has moved off stage too. Parliament had to be suspended after protests from far-right MPs. And while polls show 70% of Italians in favour, vocal demonstrations have broken out across the country. Much of the opposition is from restaurateurs, their patients already worn by lockdowns.
We shouldn't have to police this. It's not our job, and we shouldn't deal with sensitive data. The government will make us argue with customers who want to sit inside without the pass. We'll have to comply, but we've already had cancellations.
It's got nasty for medics supporting the Green Pass. Samantha Grossi received a death threat through WhatsApp, evoking the Nazi trials at Nuremberg. Other messages were on Facebook, and they came from her colleagues.
I really felt in danger. What upset me most was that the threats were from health workers. They, like us, were heroes of the pandemic, and now some are no-vax. I felt broken and thought about giving up everything. But then I realised I must go on and show they're the ones at fault.
At the arena, too, the show will go on, though with new checks for the opera lovers. Italy is beginning another act in its COVID story, but the unity felt last year is fading. Mark Lowen, BBC News, Verona.
Nearly 80,000 people have signed a petition calling on Boris Johnson to stop the killing of an alpaca called Geronimo, who has twice tested positive for bovine tuberculosis. The animal's owner in Gloucestershire claims the tests were inaccurate. Andrew Plant explains.
Geronimo, in quarantine at this Gloucestershire farm for the past 4 years, since he was imported from New Zealand. Now, though, he's set to be destroyed after owner Helen lost her fight against his positive tests for TB.
Sick, absolutely sick, because all of this was avoidable. We've had 4 years of trying to just sit down and rationally discuss the science. The science is just not there.
Farmers everywhere have cattle tested and then they get a positive result and they have to put those animals down. Why are you different?
Because the cattle test is designed for cattle, and it's established programme. That is the test for cattle.
The Environment Secretary George Eustice said he'd looked into Geronimo's case, and though he sympathised, the alpaca's tests, he said, were highly specific and reliable. Helen's been fighting the results of the test for the past 4 years, but the High Court says the results still stand. Now, yesterday, a notice of entry was issued, and that means any time in the next 30 days, officials could turn up here to put Geronimo down. In a statement, DEFRA said testing results and options for Geronimo have been very carefully considered, as well as passing several stages of thorough legal scrutiny. While nobody wants to cull infected animals, we need to do everything we can to tackle this disease. More than 40,000 cows are culled in the UK each year after testing positive for TB. Helen says Geronimo passed multiple tests before being imported and thinks the 2 tests here were flawed. She's still hoping this 8-year-old alpaca can somehow be saved. Andrew Plant, BBC News.
Estimates released in the last few minutes by the Office for National Statistics suggest that just over 810,000 people in the UK would test positive for coronavirus in the week to the 31st of July. That's down from 950,000 people the previous week. It's 1 in 80 people is what it equates to. Let's find out more from our health correspondent, Catherine da Costa. What do these ONS figures tell us then, Catherine?
Yeah, the figures have just come out in the last 20 minutes or so, and they show that the number of people testing positive has fallen in Scotland, England and Wales, but infections are still rising in Northern Ireland, where the Delta variant emerged slightly later. Now, the report authors say this fall is encouraging, but infection rates are still high in the UK, and they say they'll need more data before they can say for sure whether we're past the peak of this current wave. Now, this data covers the last week of July, so it's backwards looking, and people can still test positive for some time after an initial infection. So that's why it often takes longer for a fall in daily cases to be reflected in the ONS figures. And now, after a sharp decline, daily cases have slowed in the last couple of days. We're now seeing roughly around 26,000 new infections a day on average over the last week by that measure. But the ONS is seen as a really reliable source of data because it's a random sample of swabs from households, including those who are asymptomatic. So it gives us the bigger picture rather than on the daily figures that rely on people with symptoms coming forward for tests. Experts, though, are confident that the fall is real and it's filtering through to a fall in hospital admissions. That's down 10% over the last week. So things look like they're going in the right direction, but come autumn and winter, when we might see COVID mixed with flu and other viruses in circulation, we may still be in for a bumpy road ahead.
All right, Catherine, thanks very much. Catherine da Costa with the latest. Barcelona have announced their all-time top scorer, Lionel Messi, will be leaving this summer after failing to agree the terms of a new contract. Messi joined the club more than 20 years ago at the age of just 13. He's helped the team win more than 30 trophies and has forged a reputation as one of the greatest players of all time. Here's our sports correspondent, Joe Wilson.
Picture Lionel Messi as football's Mona Lisa, seemingly priceless, but suddenly available. Well, Barcelona have already said thank you and farewell on social media. Messi's immeasurable contribution can be suggested in statistics. 778 matches, 672 goals, 10 league titles, etc. So why let him go? Well, even with Messi agreeing a reduced salary, Barcelona's wage bill far exceeds the league's regulations. The club president says he inherited a financial calamity, and losing Messi is the only way to solve it.
The club is over 100 years old, and it's above everyone and everything, even above the best player of the world, the best player who's been with us over the last few years. And we will always thank him for everything he's done for us.
There's a theory that Argentina's Messi is the ultimate bargaining chip between Barcelona and La Liga. If Spanish football loses its star player, the whole competition is devalued, runs that argument. Yeah, but where could he go next? Paris is logical. A club backed by Qatari money PSG could afford in that city of art. A 34-year-old master. Joe Wilson, BBC News.
Most of Wales's remaining COVID rules will be scrapped from tomorrow. Social distancing rules and limits on indoor meetings will no longer apply, and nightclubs can reopen. But face coverings will still be mandatory in shops and on public transport. The Welsh Government has warned that the lifting of restrictions shouldn't be seen as a free-for-all. Now, the Edinburgh Fringe kicks off today, with the city preparing to welcome visitors as part of a month-long showcase of festivals. Events were cancelled last year, of course, because of the pandemic. Let's find out more about this year from BBC Scotland's arts correspondent Pauline McLean. What sort of summer is it shaping up to be, Pauline?
Well, it's quite interesting. I think this is the moment many of us didn't really expect to see, and there's a real kind of excitement and emotion about the festivals coming back. They're much, much smaller than in previous years. There's been a lot of kind of last-minute changing around. Obviously, people couldn't plan. We didn't know until earlier in the week just how many people could be places. But as you can see from this venue, one of many which have sprung up as part of the Fringe, they're using outdoor spaces. They're making the most of venues that they already have. The Fringe always was known for that ability to turn the most basic thing into a fantastic theatrical venue. So we've even seen things like there's a car park which 4 venues have taken over and are showcasing work in. And we're seeing that across the way. Now, the Scottish Government put up a fair amount of money to allow Fringe companies to be able to extend and expand their output so that they could have places like this that are safe for people to come back. But for most people, it's just an amazing thing that the Fringe is back, and with it, all of Edinburgh's summer festivals, because of course this is just one of 5.
Absolutely. Thanks very much for now, Pauline there. Thank you. And that takes us to a look at the weather prospects wherever you are. Louise Lear joins me. We started the programme by talking about fantastic events in Tokyo. You've been looking at the weather there, though, Louise.
Yes, spare a thought for some of the athletes that are battling with some of the extreme heat just recently. If you were watching the hockey earlier on today, the temperature on the thermometer may well have read 33 degrees, but factor in the humidity. It felt more like 43 degrees. So that really is quite incredible. And although the temperatures are falling away only slowly, so the athletics that are about to get underway, well, the temperatures will still be sitting into the high 20s, still with that humidity as well. Back to reality, however, let's get back closer to home. Unfortunately, our settled summer sunshine has abandoned us, hasn't it? With low pressure still dominating the scene generally across the country. The heaviest of the rain so far today has been through eastern Scotland, drifting its way steadily westwards. And these bands of showers moving out of Northern Ireland, northwest England and North Wales. Some of these heavy and thundery for the remainder of the afternoon. Further south, there are fewer showers around and the best of the breaks with the best of the sunshine. But nevertheless, it's a disappointing story, isn't it, really? Top temperatures of 22 degrees, that's 72 Fahrenheit. Now, as for the weekend, it looks likely that we're going to continue with a very similar weather story. Thundery showers, plenty of them, but also 1 or 2 sunny spells from time to time. And that's because the low pressure still with us on Saturday. You can see those showers spiralling around the low, starting off in the west, drifting their way steadily east as we go through the day. So the best of any drier weather will be in sheltered eastern areas, but you'll not be immune to those showers as we go through the day. It's also going to be blustery, the winds picking up, widespread gusts in excess of 30-40 miles an hour, potentially on those exposed coasts. So that is going to make it feel disappointing for this time of year, particularly if you're caught in the showers with top temperatures, well, 15 to 20 degrees. Now, the low pressure will start to drift its way out to the north and east. And so on Sunday, there's a potential maybe for fewer showers around, which will certainly come as welcome news. There will be some showers, particularly the further north and west, but central and southern parts of England, perhaps drier with some sunshine coming through, and maybe to the north of the Great Glen as well. Not a bad afternoon in prospect. Highs still disappointing though, 21 Celsius. That's 70 Fahrenheit. I can almost hear you sighing at me at the television. But there are indications that high pressure is starting to try and build in from the south, although low pressure really not moving away totally. But that does mean as we move through our week ahead, it's looking somewhat like this. For England and Wales, we might see a drier, quieter story with a little more sunshine and a degree or so warmer. But we still keep those shower risks going further north and west. Jane.
All right, Louise, thank you very much, Louise Lear. Just a reminder of our top story this lunchtime. Cycling sensation Laura Kenny becomes Team GB's most decorated female Olympian after she and teammate Katie Archibald took gold in the velodrome in Tokyo. And that is all from the lunchtime team. Do enjoy your weekend on BBC One. Let's join the BBC's news teams wherever you are. Bye-bye.